My question is regarding the mobile app. I mean, different players in Pakistan and banks, they are making and developing the mobile app. What had been done in recently in India with the help of NPCI, National Payment of Corporation of India, they had developed a UPI, the Unified Payment Interface. Instead of making a number of hundred of mobile app on the mobile phone, what you think or what your research say about the UPI? Should we incorporate, because there are technology constraint almost, because the user experience, and the gateways and the payment module. So what your thoughts and your research says about this unified payment interface? Is it good for the country? Is it good for the people? Because mostly if you find the mobile app like Facebook and LinkedIn, they are having the same feature.
Yep.
The Kenya guy or the Pakistani or anyone can find. So they can share their ideas, they can share the word of mouth. But if I'm using a different app and you are using the different app, so I think that would be the hindrance, or you
Great.
can say it's a good idea to make a unified
you.
payment interface.
Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to let Imdad answer this because
For all these learnings, I think it's just wonderful. All the small things that you're telling us. I mean, things like showing the on-screen keypad. It's just wonderful because when you open on a very small phone, the issue that you have is when the Android its own keypad opens, it hides half of your screen. So it's just very small things that are just amazing. So one question I have is that, I mean, things like adding the virtual assistant, things like having the Urdu English language, things like finding out whether your friends have done a transaction. What is the impact of all these features on the size of the app? Because so we are becoming 3G, the data is increasing, but predominantly our customers, our target market is in rural areas where 3G is still not there, and it's not going to be there in the next few months. I mean, it will take its own time. So what is the impact of all these features on the browsing speed? What is the impact of all these features on the actual size of the app? I mean, if the browsing speed is very slow, that is going to be a major experience issue for us.
Yeah, the more graphics you have, the bigger the app is.
No, but will that have impact on the browsing speed as well, or just the download size?
I think that's a technical question depending on how you develop the app.
Yeah.
on the design.
Yeah, so some teams
Are there
might
some-
decide to have a larger download file, especially it sort of corresponds to the research. The research showed that most people are waiting to connect to Wi-Fi to do things. So if they're on Wi-Fi, then the download size becomes less of a serious concern, because if you're on Wi-Fi, you're not eating up so much bandwidth, right? It should be a secure connection. But you also might decide to have more of like an online loading app. That's a decision you would have to make with your developer team. And again, we're not touching any of the
Okay.
back end
That makes sense.
on this. Yeah,
Thank you.
separate project.
But yeah, also just the memory on the phone wasn't because it was using video animations. We walked away from that as much as possible because of that consideration.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that we do also consider. I mean, there are lots of issues, there are lots of ideas that we did not execute for this very reason.
Yeah, we would love to have video tutorials, but not realistic yet. Maybe in the future. All the sonification will require quite a bit of space as well if you have the audio. So
The question I had
you
is,
didn't receive the money because he accidentally
Yeah.
sent it to them.
Yeah, I know.
He's
I
blocking
don't
the
have
plan.
money in my own account. So my question is that the USSD session, when we do transactions through USSD, we can't enter all the information in one page, so we have to do next and next and next. So the idea of the app is to be quick, fast. You just put all the details in one screen and go. And most of the apps around the world, the financial apps, all the information has been put in a single screen. But now you have suggested that the interaction, you have to enter first the customer name or his number, then the amount and all. So don't you think that this is again this replication of USSD? How customers find it different from usage perspective?
Yeah, so we discussed that a lot. We had two different concepts. Should it be on a single screen? Should it be multiple screens? We tested them both. And going to the single screens was easier for people to manage. And the trade-off of it being slower did not seem like that, didn't really slow people down that much. we had a lot of ideas about maybe you go through single screens the first time or the first 3 times, and then it becomes a single screen. But we didn't feel like we needed to pursue that. That just adds more complexity. I didn't show this in the prototype, but if you choose one of these people at the top who you transacted with before, it's sort of a simpler process. So here's the amounts you've sent in the past. Do you want to do one of those? Okay.
Kind of like a shortcut.
It's sort of a shortcut. So we think about how, for more advanced users, we could simplify that transaction flow. But ultimately, again, we were discussing these 2 approaches. You could talk about them all day. We tested both of them just to really just figure out which one should we move forward with. Maybe after additional testing, we'll need to reconsider that.
One of the reasons, so we had a screen that we tested through the prototype testing that was all information on one screen, and you kind of build the transaction row by row. The challenge there was that people didn't intuitively know to click in the field, so they were kind of waiting for that like next button to bring them to the next field. They didn't really understand intuitively that you press in a field. So that's where people got a little bit stuck. So it wasn't as intuitive for them. It's not to say, here's the challenge. It's not to say that this design is going to be the right design 5 years down the road, right? That's why this iterative process is so important. You need to like constantly be doing testing with your users to see like, okay, well maybe our users are now much more sophisticated than they were in 2016. Now it's 2020. People have had smartphones for 4 years. They've been using mobile financial services for 4 years. Now we can do it in one click, no big deal. If you guys have seen the Google Pay app, they have one field, that's it. Just fill in like a number, period, boom, you're done. That's because users in the US who are using Google Pay have been on smartphones for a decade now, and we all just intuitively know what's going on. And like I said, my 2-year-old godson could probably send money on Google Pay, right? Or use Google Pay. So what works today is not necessarily what's going to work in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years for sure. So this is what makes sense right now for this market, but you're going to need to constantly be iterating and revising. And that's like the cost of doing technology solutions, right? Technology is constantly speeding up and evolving, and people are keeping up with it. So trade-offs. But we tested both, to your point. All right, last final comment, and then Imdad's going to wrap us up, right? Yes, sir.
Your perspective is Pakistan from the lower end market for example, in the States.
Yeah.
How much difference is there? Do you think it's a very big void? I mean, can you give us some kind of an idea?
No, I mean here's what's interesting. Universally, poor people, let's just call it poor people broadly, the similarities are very strong across the world. Low-income people in the U.S. are also unbanked. They don't have bank accounts.
Right.
They have cell phones, just like poor people here in Pakistan have cell phones. Poor people in Kenya have cell phones. Poor people in India have cell phones. Poor people in Ecuador have cell phones. But poor people across the universe, across the world, are unbanked. That's a commonality. So from a research perspective, like insights, a lot of these findings, yes, they're very specific to the Pakistan market because that's where we did the research. And this design is appropriate for the Pakistan market. Our colleague Gabe, who worked on this with us, he's doing essentially the exact same project, but for Telenor in Myanmar, Wave Money, the brand new mobile financial service company. His design is not that dissimilar from our design. They look very different, but a lot of the same rationale becomes relevant because, again, like there are similarities in just human behavior. The difference in Myanmar is that they never had feature phones because it was a closed country. They completely leapfrogged, so they never had USSD. So they don't have this trouble of how do we move people away from USSD and into smart. They're all just adopting smartphones right off the bat and using smartphone apps. So that's like a benefit. But compared to the US, there's a lot of similarities into Europe and
But
to
even,
Africa.
for example, adoption. I've read studies where there's evidence that adoption in for example, Africa and parts of Asia is much higher than it is in the US.
Yeah.
So
Part of that is our regulations are way more strict. So mobile money, we don't have mobile money the way you have mobile money.
right.
So it can't exist in the US because of our regulations. That's The US actually, even though it's coming up with a lot of the innovation, it's not because they're creating innovation for the US. It's creating innovation for other countries. So regulation is a huge problem in the US. We have digital financial services, but it's not mobile money like you all have. What makes Pakistan a little bit more unique than other markets is your reliance and breadth of OTC. So that creates a unique market, a unique ecosystem, which brings some unique challenges as you all are trying to scale your mobile financial services. Because the reliance on OTC is quite strong here, much stronger here than in other markets.
We definitely had a number of participants who said, hey, this app is really great, but you know what? It takes me a minute to walk to my agent, so I'm happy with that. Also, I would just another observation from our prototyping research, I went into that thinking that these prototypes are going to fail. These are actually going to be too complicated. But that was not the case. People, by and large, got through them. The challenge was making them comfortable enough to just try. It took a lot, and Ali was leading those research sessions, just getting these mostly women confident enough to just give it a go.
Yeah.
Once they were in there, it was pretty smooth sailing.
Yeah, there actually wasn't a huge difference between what we call like a super user. I think of one woman in particular. She used mobile at a time. She was in the app. She was clicking through really quickly, no big deal, very confident. There wasn't a huge difference between her once she was in the app and our like newer non-users once they started clicking. But it was that initial like getting them to click through and try things. Once they started, very fluid, little challenge. But it's that like first time confidence build, trust that prevents a lot of people, especially women, from participating, for sure. But that's universal. That's not just Pakistan.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of similarities, absolutely.